Next video will most likely be random redesigns, unless I'm struck by sudden inspiration. So, I really didn't want to work on a redesign, but I did kind of want to create a character design. Luckily for me, I do have a lot of ideas bouncing around in my head, and one of them was to create a character based on a character concept that already exists in-game that I had a different vision for. That sounds kind of incoherent, but it will make sense once we actually get into it. For this video, the specific character I had in mind was Kirara. She's a Geo. No, she's not. Why did I write she's Geo? She's Dendro. Why did I say she's Geo? Hello, future Miki here. I kept that in. Mostly because, first of all, I'm fairly certain I wrote down that she was Geo because I was thinking of the leaks where she was Geo, and I wanted to kind of make some sort of visual gag with the old leak appearing with her old name, because she wasn't always Kirara, she used to be Momoka, and I wanted to kind of do you hear the old version of me being super confused while that picture zooms in and stuff. But what I found instead while looking for that leaked image was concept art of Momoka, and the interesting thing here is that she had a single tail that will be relevant later in the video. Keep that information in mind. I'm gonna leave y'all to that. Let's get back to the video. Kirara is a Dendro sword user from Inazuma, but more importantly for this video, she's a Nekomata. In Japanese folklore, Nekomata are cats that turn into yokai after they've lived for long enough. Once a cat becomes a Nekomata, its tail splits in two and it gains the ability to speak and shapeshift amongst other powers. I always really liked this specific yokai because I like cats, so I was very interested in what Hoyo would do with the concept. I was not really happy with what Hoyo did with the concept. Okay, listen. Kirara is very cute. I like her cat feet and the fact she has a bow in her hair instead of actual cat ears. The design is fine. The character is fine. But she's missing the essential characteristic that would make her a true Nekomata. She isn't filled with hatred and contempt for the human race. That is a very important aspect of Nekomata. They're mean to people, and also apparently eat them sometimes. They can raise the dead, and they're highly associated with fire. But the whole hating humans is particularly important because it's also one of the things that distinguishes them from Rakeneko, another cat yokai with a single tail this time, who is mostly seen as mischievous. Future Miki back again. This is why this was important. It kind of explains why Kirara is the way she is. She was supposed to be a backup. Oh, that's why she's like this. Okay, back to the video, bye-bye. All this to say, I wanted to make a Nekomata character that was a huge misanthrope. Before I started drawing, I already had a vague idea of what I wanted my gal to look like. I knew I wanted her to be older than Kirara. I'm pretty sure Kirara became a Nekomata fairly recently. So the idea here was that this character had been a yokai for at least a century or two. I wanted her to have a very traditional look to her, and I also really wanted her to have the same white tips on her tails as Kirara because I thought that'd be super cute. That's the only reason. I just thought it'd be cute. Once I started sketching, I kind of just tried a bunch of different ideas, especially for the hair. At first, I wanted something fancy and structured, reminiscent of a geisha hairstyle, but I also thought it would make more sense for her to be a little more unkempt. In the end, I did kind of really like the structured look. For her kimono, I already knew I wanted it to be on the longer side, although I was still hesitating between giving her a vest called the heiori over her kimono or not. I did like the idea of her wearing some sort of fur, and that manifested at first as a fluffy scarf before turning into the lining for her heiori. I also scuffed up one of her ears just a little bit to imply that she'd probably been through some stuff. After all that drawing, I moved to more drawing. I wanted to further detail her design and try a few more things. You'll notice I was having a bit too much fun with some silly expressions. I briefly thought about adding something to her hair before very quickly changing my mind. But I did decide to give her a little collar, with the implication that she'd been a house cat in her previous life and had been so used to it that she'd made one for herself after becoming a yokai. This is also when I got the idea of adding some spider lily motifs since they're associated with death. While I didn't want to really give her the ability to raise the dead, actually I did kind of do that in the end, I did like the idea of referencing it in her design. For now, the motif was mostly on her collar and the rope of her obi, but it will make an appearance once I start adding colors. I also had the idea of giving her arms some dark gradients and claws to add some more inhuman features. It does look extremely reminiscent of Arlecchino, but in my defense, it looks really cool on Arlecchino, and I kind of wanted the character where you could actually see decorated at all times. After a few more sketches, testing out outfits, I finally moved to finalizing and coloring the design. For the fluff of her haori, I decided to give it these shapes inspired by onibi, or demon fire, which are basically Japanese will-o-wisps, to make it more visually interesting. The first color pass had a lot of pink and reds, and I felt like I could find something more visually interesting. So I kind of copy-pasted the base sketch and tried something different. I decided to make her hair a little bigger, and you'll see me making it even bigger during the sketching process. And I also decided to forego the haori this time, turning the lining into more of a fluffy boa. For her colors, I added more blue to her palette and gave her kimono these blue burn marks of sorts. I will admit, I added those more on a whim. I did briefly attempt to give her some socks before very quickly changing my mind. I was super happy with the final look, but before moving to the finished artwork, I did a messy sketch of her full design, which did give me the idea of ripping up the lower half of her kimono. For the final artwork, I wanted something that looked more like a trip marketing pose rather than a splash art. While I had a bunch of ideas for her kit, like her being pyro and using blue flames, I didn't really want to think too hard about it and come up with a burst for her. So I chose the pose, took some reference pictures of myself, and went to work. I'm not gonna really detail the process on this one, so instead I'll talk a little bit about this gal. I initially wanted to give her Kira's old pre-release name, Momoka, but I don't think it suits her that much. I do like the idea of her potentially having some sort of nickname that other yokai gave her, or a title or something. Honestly, I have not figured that part. In terms of her personality, she's very standoffish, which makes sense, that was kind of the goal of this design, and can only stand to be in the presence of animals and other yokai. She absolutely despises humans for reasons linked to her past as a pet. She was pampered and loved by her owners, but outlived them as they were an elderly couple, especially as her own lifespan seemed to stretch past what was expected of an ordinary cat. The family of her deceased owners suspected she might be a yokai or even an evil spirit, pretending to be a cat, and that she might have even caused her owners' deaths. What else could explain the fact that she'd been alive for long enough to see children in the family be born, grow into adults, and have children of their own? So they chased her away, threw stones at her, tried to hurt her, spit venomous words at her as she ran into the mountains for safety. She'd been part of their lives for decades, yet they treated her like she was a curse, a monster. Betrayed and angry, the little cat vowed never to trust a single human ever again. On her fourth night in the mountains, her tail split in two, and she gained supernatural abilities. She'd become a yokai, the very thing she was chased away for. She felt no joy at the prospect. And that's her sad backstory. I really liked the idea that she'd been mistaken for a bakeneko who have a similar origin, being pets who turn into yokai with old age. While they're generally considered less malicious than nekomata, they have a reputation for killing their owners and replacing them. For a grief-stricken family, the explanation would definitely make sense, especially since they were kinda right. But yeah, the experience completely soured her from humans. Despite it all, and despite all the years since, she does still feel warmth for her owners. Hence why she gave herself a collar. But outside of that, she's a grade A hater. Do not even think about coming in her nook of the woods. She will burn you to a crisp. Only the Traveler and Paimon get a pass. I thought about the fact she actually wears clothes and has a human form quite a bit. It might feel like it's kind of a contradiction given her misanthropic personality, but the idea here is that she does like the aesthetics of humankind. Think of it like someone who really likes goth fashion and wears things that fit the aesthetics, but aren't goth in any way, shape, or form, and would never actually step near an actual goth person. Basically, she's what we would call back in the day a poser. I think people have been using the term LARPer recently, and the term cosplay was also used to talk about that. And I can't help but notice that these are very geeky terms used in ways that have nothing to do with their origins, and by people who aren't part of these hobbies and don't really know anything about them, or associate with people who are into those hobbies. A very poser-coded, if you ask me. Okay, the design's finished. Forget what I just said. Check it out. I'm not gonna say I'm very happy with this design, because of course I am. I just designed my ideal Nikomata character. I drew her cat form as well. Unlike Kirara, she's kind of just a regular cat in that form, and it's not something you'd be able to turn into during gameplay. It appears during an idle animation. If you stay idle for too long, she turns into her little cat form and takes a nap until you start moving. I just thought that would be so cute. I did also think of a passive she might have where she revives fallen party members if she's on the team, like what Columbina and C6 Barbara do, which, haha, it's a nod to Nikomata raising the dead. Haha, I did say that. Ended up adding it to her character in a way. And I also drew her and Kira as chibi. I like to think that because Kira is so much younger than her and is constantly around humans, our Nikomata character would have this very strong protective urge towards her, always telling her to be careful around those nasty humans and being super overbearing. She means well, but it's a lot. And that's my take on a Nikomata character. What do you guys think? She's kind of the anti-Kirara, which was kind of also an accident, but it does create kind of a fun dynamic between the two. I'm also realizing that I gave them complementary colors, and that was an accident, but I'm not complaining. As always, feel free to share your thoughts and opinions. They're always fun to read. If you have ideas for a name or title for her, or even a kid actually, I'd love to hear them. Next video will be the final part of the Archon Elemental Swap mini-series. So if you're not subscribed and you don't want to miss it, you know what to do. Like the video if you liked the video. If you disliked the video, don't tell me cause I'll cry. Hype the video if you feel like it. And as always, thanks for watching and see you next time. Bye bye!